Hey guys, today we want to talk all about paying off those credit cards. How should we do it? What should we be thinking about? What are some efficient strategies to do so? But if today's your first time joining us, welcome. My name is Michael Foley. I'm a certified financial planner and student loan professional, and I'm also the son of two doctors, and really developed lifestyle creep here to help our healthcare workers in our society to live more intentional lives in their finances and help them really extract the most life out of the money that they are blessed with. So let's dive in today. Today we want to talk. It's a common thing that we see with, a lot of times when we have clients that go through residency and then maybe incur some credit card debt, or maybe they've been in practice for a while and have had one thing after the next, kind of continue to build on and develop some other credit card debt. Unfortunately, it's incredibly common that we see this, and so I want to talk through some different ways of approaching our credit card debt, because there's some traditional understandings of how we just get rid of credit card debt, but as you'll see, we may not be actually fixing the root problem here, right? So as we can see, so we're going to always have the symptom, which is our credit card debt. That's what we're trying to treat. But as you guys know, in the healthcare space, sometimes just treating the symptom may not alleviate that. Maybe, just because you have a headache, you can give someone Advil and maybe that'll help alleviate their headache. But maybe there's something else going on. Maybe there's some other disease that we haven't approached, which in the finance world, maybe that's just having the lack of emergency reserve from other things that come up, or maybe it's our spending habits that are really getting in the way and that are causing this symptom of more credit card debt, right? So really breaking it down, identifying what is the symptom is the credit card debt. We know that, but what is that true disease that we need to be approaching, and how should we be treating that? Okay. So before we go into the treating the disease, let's talk about treating the symptom, right? Because I think it's helpful to understand how do we actually get out of the credit card debt, right? So if we're just treating that symptom, so the two big different big concepts that we can have is either essentially consolidating and doing balance transfers, maybe using a home equity line of credit, something else, essentially buying that debt from the credit card with another form of debt. So we're not really actually getting out of debt, we're just kind of shifting the dice here and trying to move it around to make sure that it's maybe at a lower interest rate. There's balance transfer opportunities that we can get a 0% interest loan, on a credit card for 12 to 18 months, which can be really helpful for a lot of our residents, maybe going through training, and maybe we call it playing hot potato a little bit to try to get through to the end of training until you become an attending, and then now we can make a lot more money. We can knock those out, right? So those can be an efficient strategy. Sometimes there are other personal loans you can take out. They're not great interest right now, but oftentimes it's a heck of a lot better than what they're charging you at the credit card companies, which are in the mid to high 20s, some even higher than that. So sometimes the consolidation can essentially slow the bleeding of that. So maybe alleviate some of the interest hemorrhaging that's happening from the credit card, but we're really not completely suturing up that cut. We're still going to be bleeding out some interest when we do that, right? And now the other strategy is what we call either an avalanche or a snowball approach to just paying off the debt, right? So these are two different popular strategies to getting out of that debt. And so how can we most efficiently pay that credit card those credit cards off? So if we have multiple credit cards that all have balances, which ones do we pay off first, right? So traditional financial planning, so we're taught in our CFP board, and kind of conventional wisdom will share that the avalanche is the most effective method, right? And what that says is that you line up all of your credit card debts that you owe and you pay them off based off of the highest interest rate first. No matter the balance, you start paying that one down, and then once you pay that one off, then you go to the next highest interest rate, pay that one off till it's done, and then go down the line, right? So that's called the avalanche. So you go based off of the biggest interest rate, tackle that one first, because that one's bleeding out the most, if you will. So we want to stop that one first as much as we can, and then go to the next one, and the next one, right? So now one of the other options that we have that's been popularized by Dave Ramsey, and initially this is something that I was not a big fan of, in looking at it. But what they essentially are suggesting is that instead of looking at the interest rate, looking at the actual size of the credit card. So instead of lining it up from, biggest interest rate to smallest interest rate, they almost say don't even look at the interest rate, just look at the smallest loan put that first and then go all the way to the biggest loan. And so the concept is paying off the smallest debt first and then snowballing to pay off that. And then once you pay one off, take that minimum payment and then apply it to the next loan and the next loan. And then you can kind of compound. So that's why they call it like a snowball, right? So this goes against kind of conventional financial thought on that, because we want to, when you look at the math, if you pay off the higher interest rate first, it's going to result in the better. But, one of the research studies that I found that was actually done by James Madison, they actually compared these side by side and actually ran the math and looked at a lot of actual real world data of like not just the math, but actual like people paying these things off. And they were actually pretty close. And so it's kind of opened my mind up to saying, okay, well, hey, if we're doing the snowball method, it's, the Avalanche still did come out ahead, but it was pretty darn close. And so there's a lot of other psychological benefits to the snowball method that we don't get with the Avalanche method, that, like the small wins, right? So maybe if you think about it as a kid that you're raising and you want to help them do well in some sport or something, you kind of want to give them some small wins to get them motivated, to get it excited to do something like that. That's the whole premise of the snowball. So if you can knock one credit card off, check that off your list, it's super satisfying, right? And then you move on to the next, and that momentum ends up being pretty close to the Avalanche as well. So if you're if you can be more controlled and you understand kind of the math behind it, sometimes for me, just understanding that, hey, I can stop the bleeding of the higher interest rate first, that's maybe what I would do, right? But if you're just like, I got so many different things going on and I need some small wins to get motivated on this, or else I'm actually not even going to want to put attention to paying off the credit cards, then you should definitely look at the snowball and get some small wins under your belt and just get started. Because at the end of the day, you're kind of landing in a pretty similar spot. And at the end of the day, either of these are building your net wealth at the end of the day. So that's what we really like to see, okay? So when we're looking at these treatments, these are the most effective way to get that paid off. Consolidation is or balance transfers. Those are essentially just shuffling the deck. We're not really, getting rid of that debt, that debt that we have. And, the Ramsey Solutions actually also did some research on it and said that 78% of the people that do a consolidation, that debt actually comes back. Right? So it's not actually going to be going away and getting paid off. So 78% of the time that actually does come back. And so you can see why all these credit cards want you to do the balance transfers, because 78% of the time that does turn into a super high interest rate, loan that you owe to that credit card. And so that's how these credit card companies make all this money. But yes, we can have control and we can have, be disciplined with that, but the odds are not in our favor when we're looking at it. And if 78% of the time something happens, it's not something that we want to necessarily look at doing. And so if we can maybe even just jump right into this and get it paid off more effectively and save some of the fees that would go associated with consolidating those, it's something that we got to be thinking about. And in the context of your overall plan, how aggressive we're going to be able to pay those off, okay? Now, let's talk about the disease, right? Because, like we talked about, the credit card debt is not usually the root cause, right? The credit card debt is usually a product of, either not having emergency reserves or having some sort of spending habit that's not conducive with how much you're making, right? And so I think the lack of reserves, this is sometimes just things happen in life, right? And that's kind of the Murphy's Law, right? It's inevitable that these things are going to come up. And so the simplest way of getting rid of that is having an emergency reserve. If we can build up, anywhere from like 3 to 6 months worth of our expenses, and if we're just getting started off, that might seem like super daunting, but maybe just starting with 5 or 10,000 just as a backup reserve tank to prevent those other things from happening, those inevitable things, because there's nothing more disheartening and when you're trying to go on the Avalanche or the Snowball and then something else happens and then you end up going into more credit card debt. So we call this the short-term debt treadmill. And so but usually the short-term debt treadmill is caused because we don't have an emergency reserve for those things that we can't predict, right? But then the other thing is that we also see that sometimes we have spending habits that maybe are credit cards are enabling us to spend more than we have, right? And so I think that's something that, oftentimes we all kind of have that one thing that maybe we kind of know that we spend a little bit too much on, right? For me, that was cars historically. I would consider myself a recovering car guy, right? But that was one thing that, it's sometimes you just kind of identify what is that thing for you. Sometimes it's people have it as travel, right? And maybe, you want to go buy a big trip and you just want to put it on the credit card, but maybe we don't have that money in the account yet. But those are certain things that maybe it's those habits that we got to commit to understand that we can't spend money that we don't have yet, right? And that is something that we got to do some more intrinsic thinking about. What is that thing for you, and what is that, so that we can know the enemy and how to combat that moving forward. Okay. Now let's talk about some treatments of these. So the lack of reserves, having a separate savings account tends to be a more efficient process than just having your checking and savings account with the same bank. So for two reasons. One, a lot of these online savings accounts are earning tremendous interest right now. So some of them, as of 2024, are earning like 4 to 4.5% interest rate, and so those are huge, right? And so we want to not only we can grow a little bit of money, but really more importantly, when we're trying to pay this credit card debt off, having the separation, just, you can still transfer the funds back and forth between your everyday checking and your online savings, but it takes like a day or two to transfer those funds. And so we found that is enough of a hurdle for that to just be kind of out of sight, out of mind, and stay built up a little bit more effectively, okay? So a separate savings account is a big one. Shifting to only debit card use or cash use only is going to be a really effective way. A lot of people are super nervous about using just their credit card for the security protocol and not wanting to get hacked or things like that, and you feel that there's a lot more security with credit cards. But actually, go to Visa, go to MasterCard, whoever is your debit card. You'll see that there's actually the same protections for most of these debit cards that there are for your credit card. The only difference is that if they take the money out of your account, obviously you're out that money as opposed to just owing more on your credit card, right? So, but a lot of the banks will actually offer provisional credits while they investigate that and actually get that money back to you. So there's not as much of a risk using your debit card as even I thought originally. And so when you actually do your research on it and look at the actual safety around that, it's actually a lot more secure than you would think, as long as you're being very protective around your PIN number, right? Cash is always a great one. But if you're not comfortable with a debit card, shift your credit card usage to the one that you're using and maybe not paying off or not trying to put more on, and have that balance paid weekly. So you can set reminders to have that paid every week so that you can really feel that coming out of your account. Because the farther we get away from spending the money to actually having to pay that, the more confusing it gets, and then you really don't even remember what you even spent that money on, right? So we want to close that gap between you spending money and you feeling that in your checking account, okay? The other one is proactive savings for the goal. So like we talked about, if we're paying this off, we need to agree that we're not going to spend money that we don't have, right? If we are trying to get out of credit card debt, we can't put more onto credit cards. And so that doesn't mean that, let's say, you wanted to buy, a trip or something like that. I'm not saying that we can't just do any travel, right? But now we got to get the better habit to identify, all right, if we want to travel, we got to save a set amount each month so that we can set up like a travel fund and just build that into cash. And then once you have enough in there, you can go use that to buy the trip, right? So just getting more proactive with that is going to be a more effective way, a better habit to develop, as opposed to resorting to that really easy credit card, just the swipe, right? And then the last one is really understanding what is that budget, and as the old proverb says, know well the condition of your flock, right? It's really important to understand, where is your money going on a monthly basis. And so a lot of people, myself included, it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts, and you don't even know where your money's going sometimes, right? And so when you're shifting to debit card or cash usage, that will really open your eyes to where that is going. But you can proactively do that with just filling out a budget, right? Or using some of these budgeting tools online and try to identify what's coming in on a monthly basis, where is that going, and then looking at it and say, all right, of this, do I actually value all of these things that are on this budget, or are there things that maybe I value more? I value getting out of this credit card debt more than having this random subscription that I haven't used for 6 months, right? So being thoughtful in that. So hopefully this is helpful understanding kind of the different, try to treat not only just the symptom of the credit card debt, but really get to the root cause of what is that disease that got you into the credit card debt in the beginning, and help us get some strategies to avoid going into that short-term debt treadmill again and again. So thanks again for joining, and I hope to see you in the next episode.